Okay. Hi, everybody. Welcome. Thanks for joining. I am Emily Anderson, the founder of Mom Crew. I founded Mom Crew in 2019 when I was living in New York with a goal of helping expectant and new moms connect with one another. So I managed Mom Crew Facebook groups, and I used to do really fun in-person meetups for moms to be and new moms. Since COVID hit, unfortunately, haven't been able to get back to that yet, but it has given me a great opportunity to pivot into virtual events, which allow so many people to join. We actually had 300 people RSVP'd for today's talk, which is amazing. It's also given me a great opportunity to partner in other ways with great organizations, Vivi. We've done a few events together. Some of you might have attended before on various topics. I think we're going to have some more coming up through the end of the year. So keep your eye out for those. Today, we will be talking about different daycare and preschool philosophies. We have two great people from Vivi today. I'm going to turn it right over to Gretchen, who is going to share a little bit more info about herself and Lynne and Vivi, and then take everybody through a short presentation to provide some very helpful information. While they're talking, if you have any questions, please add them to the chat. Feel free to introduce yourself there as well. I'm sure we're all really familiar with Zoom by now, but just in case anyone isn't, if you hover over the main screen, a bar will appear in the bottom, and that's where you can find the chat box. So if you just click on it, it'll pop up and you can add your questions there. All right, well, thanks so much. I will turn it right over now to Gretchen.
Hi, everyone. I'm echoing Emily's thanks and real excitement for all of you to be joining us here and for working with Mom Crew again. I wish I have a almost 4-year-old, and I wish I knew about Emily back in the beginning, because she has created such an amazing community and really has targeted a lot of the specific areas of focus that I know parents are really curious about. So we love partnering with you, Emily, and we're so excited to be back here again on a topic that is really important to all of us. To give you a little bit of background on Vivi and who I am, Vivi is an early childcare and learning center based in New York. We started out with 3 brick and mortar campuses. Really, our goal is to meet parents where they are, and specifically, we want to meet parents that are working in and provide an excellent form of childcare and learning for their children, while they can also succeed as parents and as professionals. And so extending out through Vivi, we offer options that are 7 to 7, Monday through Friday, and really have, we hope, taken the best of a lot of the pedagogies out there and informed our curriculum and care. When the pandemic hit in 2020, we truly knew that we had to meet our parents where they are, and we ventured out into what we call Vivi in Home. This program is essentially taking the great care and learning we provide on campus and bringing it into your home, either on a one-to-one or a small group basis, partnering with you to provide an excellent caretaker and educator inside your home. And since then, we've moved on to virtual tutoring to in-office care, and really our goal is to bring this idea that childcare can be something for all to as many community members as possible. So thanks again for joining us. And before I introduce my colleague, my esteemed colleague, I'm so happy to be talking about all of the childcare approaches out there and learning philosophies. So whether you've arrived here just looking into schools, just kind of getting your feet wet and trying to understand what the landscape looks like. I know we've got some people looking into an early daycare, some people are looking into preschool. We may have people who are even thinking about pre-K and beyond. This is all really informative for you at any stage. You might have an infant or a toddler, and you are starting to try to understand them as a learner and what might help them thrive, and that we'll discuss that as well. And perhaps you've got some beliefs and core philosophies in your own family's life that are really driving this conversation. And so at any point, wherever you are in this journey, we think that this can be applied and informed. And we hope you'll walk away here having a great understanding of some of the approaches out there and what direction you think you might head in. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Lynne, who's going to be driving a lot of the conversation. Please introduce who you are and what you do, and then we'll dive in.
Thanks, Gretchen. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for taking time out of your busy day. I'm Lynne Mueller. I am the head of learning at Vivi, and my role, I oversee the curriculum. So that means supporting teachers, supporting children, and supporting parents in, learning about curriculum, because like children are being educated, we know that parents also need to learn and to be educated about best practice. So that's why we're here today.
Amazing. So I'm going to share my screen so that everyone can see our slide deck and who we are. And then before we dive in, just want to give you a little bit of an agenda of what we'll be covering. So before we think specifically about the common approaches that you might find out there, we want you to just do a little bit of a self-reflection and try to understand first and foremost what matters to you. What are the logistics around making decisions on early learning? What's important to your family? A lot of things to start thinking about as you prepare to understand some of the common approaches. We'll cover approaches including Reggio, Montessori, the Vivi learning model, among some others. And then we'll dive into how our model has kind of cherry-picked the best of all of those worlds, and then do a Q&A with the audience. And so before we get into the specific approaches, Lynne, I'd love to have you kind of go out. We'll be talking through play-based, we'll be talking through Montessori, Reggio, Waldorf, and a little bit about language immersion programs. But if you could just kind of go into some of the things to really consider before you're really looking into this approach.
Yeah, so besides the philosophy, what you're thinking that you want, you need to really think about the logistics. Like what's practical, what makes sense for you and your family. So things to think about are the hours of operation. For instance, at Vivi, as Gretchen said, we're open from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. We have early drop off, we have late hours. So you need to figure out what your family needs and if the school works and, if the hours aren't long enough, how you're going to supplement the time. Also, something you might not know because your child is younger, but, what kind of learner is your child? Does your child respond to audio kinds of information, or are they visual learners? I mean, this is really for pre-K and beyond, but that's really important when you're looking at a program. And I think also you need, when you're looking, think about, you might want a school that has a certain religious affiliation. If that's the case, that's going to sort of target certain schools. If you have a sibling, maybe you want to know, does the school have a sibling policy? Will they just take your second child automatically, or do you have to apply again? And also, like your child, you're going to be making new friends. I know, like my dearest friends I met when my own children went to nursery school. So you want to see, what kind of population like you feel comfortable with, what feels right to you, when you meet parents. Also, this is really important, the distance from your house. I know many of you are out of New York, so you're driving or you're in New York, but you might want to consider a school that's close by. I learned this the hard way. When my child was, 18 months, I decided, okay, ready for school. Vivi didn't exist, so I went into a traditional nursery school. Of course, he was accepted. I was thrilled, of course, whatever. And then I realized it was about 5 miles from my house. In New York terms, 5 miles is a really far distance. It's really too far to walk every day if you have to get there in time, and it's hard to, the subway's not close. And so I figured out how to make it work, and I dealt with it. But if I had to do it all over again, I definitely would pick a school that I could just walk to with the stroller, drop them off, and, play dates would have been in the neighborhood. So that's just something I wanted you to think about. So, navigating this world of early childhood choices is really not an easy one. And, you're going to hear about different schools, different philosophies. And quite honestly, they're not going to be totally distinct. There's going to be some blurred lines there of things like, oh, that sounds the same as another school. So what I suggest is when you visit a school, the best piece of advice I can give you is like really to trust your gut. Think about like, does this feel right to you? You know, it's sort of like an intuitive sense, and you might be saying, I don't know what that means. You will when you're there. And also be open to all the philosophies. So you might think you know exactly what you want for your child. Just be a little open. By the end of the session, you might say, I still want that kind of school. Or you might say, you know what, I think I want to do some research on other schools. And so, you know, those are the things just to think about. And now I'm going to talk about the different philosophies.
So I think we had a slide skipped a little bit ahead, and we gave you a teaser before we started talking about the logistics. So it sounds like you're starting with this idea of what can I do logistically with my family? What is in range geographically, out of range? Where is my budget? What's the commute? What's the schedule look like? What are all of those? What's physically realistic inside the area? You're trying to think of your child and how they're learning, or your whole family philosophy of what it means to be learning. And then you're really getting a sense of what all of these approaches look like. And so we thought we'd dial into play-based as a concept, Montessori, Reggio, Waldorf, and language immersion.
So I'm going to start by talking about play-based schools. So for young children, play is their work. It's really how they learn about their environment, they learn about the world around them. So, you know, even though, you know, most schools, the majority of schools are play-based, you know, that's sort of like a given. However, within that play-based way of doing things, many schools have a distinct philosophy. So they sort of go hand in hand. Play-based is not ditto sheets. What are ditto sheets? You know, trace, you know, circle the letters in your name maybe, or trace the numbers. A play-based curriculum is a hands-on curriculum. Children use materials, toys to set the learning tone. And it is not sort of what I like to call like an in-the-box kind of thing where there's only one answer. Play-based is exploratory, and it gives children opportunities to really feel good about themselves as learners.
Have you found any non-play-based, are there pros and cons of a non-play-based school? I know what you prefer.
I mean, research shows this is how young children learn best developmentally. I mean, what it shows is that, you know, the early childhood years are not sort of a watered down kindergarten. When you get to kindergarten, it's a whole different game, but developmentally, they're ready for a different kind of learning. But for young children, they really need to have opportunities to explore things at their own pace. Children just develop differently. And what's most important at this age is the social emotional development of a child. When they feel like they are a great learner, they will learn to their potential. And that's really what all the research says.
Thanks, Lynn. And I will take a moment. I know we've got some parents here who are looking at a daycare, it sounds like, for their younger children, and also thinking about a preschool. One idea to think through is, are you looking for perhaps a school that's 0 to 5? Vivi happens to be one of those where our philosophy is pretty much the same throughout the age groups, but we scaffold our learning. Whereas how streamlined or how specific do you want the daycare versus the preschool? Are you looking for two similarly based schools, or are you expecting that potentially that might transition into philosophies? So just kind of something to hold in the air there. So coming out of the play-based approach, we'll first chat about Montessori.
So yeah, so just, you know, this is something, you know, many of you have heard, what is Montessori? You know, everyone's thinking about it. So Montessori, there's a focus on meeting each child's developmental needs, which is what we talked about before, in all areas of development. What's unique about Montessori, besides being hands-on, it's sort of like a mixed group environment. So it's not based on a child's chronological age. It's based on where they are developmentally. So in one group, you might have a child who's 2 and 4 in the same group, but that's where they're at, and everything is accepting. Things to consider when you're thinking of Montessori. To me, the most important thing is many schools call themselves Montessori, but you want to know if the teachers are certified in Montessori, because that makes a huge difference in how they deliver the information. So that is an important question to ask. I have to say the materials are beautiful in Montessori programs. They're just lovely. And sometimes other schools use those materials, but it's also very structured. So you have to think, and we talked about your child is a learner, is this the kind of environment that you believe will work well for your child? So, as children move up, with their learning, they just move on to different things in a structured manner.
And so that may work for someone who really thrives on structure, for a child that's thriving on structure, or if you are finding that potentially they haven't had structure, but you think implementing that would be a good approach.
Absolutely. I mean, I just want to go back to something. So I'm thinking about structure. Sometimes when you think of play-based, you think, oh, so they play all day, they don't do anything. Play does have structure in it, but there's all kinds of structure in a early childhood environment. Some are more structured than others. And Montessori has when I say structure, it's a very set way of doing things. If a child's using one material and they decide they want to do something else, they need to wait till they finish the task on that material.
Interesting. And you said you think that the materials are really lovely. What does lovely mean to you?
I think that, they're made of natural materials. So they're wood-based and they're just very thoughtfully designed. I mean, they were initiated by the person who started Montessori. Her name was Maria Montessori. And they're just beautiful. They're beautiful to look at and to use.
Lynne, do you find that Montessori approaches start a little bit more in the older ages of preschool, or are there Montessori approaches that are from early childhood, from 0 to 1?
It usually starts when children are around 2 years old. So if this is an approach that you're interested in, then there is a possibility that you would go to one school and then you would go to another school. But again, just make sure that they're really doing Montessori there. So Reggio is another sort of buzzword. I mean, in New York it is, schools say, oh, we're a Reggio school. So Reggio school is a project-based school. So what does that mean, a project-based school? It means like they come up with a topic and they will work with that topic for a very long time. And these topics are based on children's interests. The environment is considered to be the third teacher. This is like a big deal. You think about this, the teachers and what they do, but the third teacher or the environment really supports the flow of the day. So when you're going to a Montessori school, you'll see if that kind of environment, which again, it's natural materials, it's recycled materials. Community is also a big part of the experience. So engaging community. I mean, of course, now, in most schools, parents can't go into the school, but they have lots of different ways to get them engaged. Like Montessori, lots of schools might say they're a Reggio school, but you want to make sure that they're using a Reggio approach. Reggio is one of those things, people like to talk about. It's more than a play-based school. It's really using natural materials and being project-based, which means not all classes will be having the same theme for a week and it'll be more than a week, it'll be a month. If they're using, a standardized curriculum, it's not a pure Reggio approach. Might be part of Reggio approach, but not a pure one.
Lynne, thank you for this. I'm going to go back and forth with Montessori and Reggio because we've had a couple questions that I want to make sure we don't get too far into. as you were talking about Montessori, which is probably the most structured of these approaches, one of the ways you talked through structure was if I'm focused on one toy or one process or one project, and my interest goes elsewhere, I'm going to have to finish what I'm doing before I can move on to do another project.
That's one form of
structure.
In a pure Montessori program. I'm not saying all Montessori programs.
Oh, hi. I'm sorry. I'll talk to you later. I'm in a conference. Thank you.
You know, every school, you know, some schools modify a Montessori approach, but I'm talking from a purist point of view. You know, and that's part of, you know, being on task and completing a task.
Are there any other specific examples of a pure Montessori where structure would come into play where it may not show up in other approaches? This idea of more of a rigid structure.
No, I think it's about the materials and the structure. So, you know, I mean, I think, you know, if your child is someone who you know needs a little bit of an extra prompt in certain areas, your child might be with a younger group. So you have to decide if that will work for you. It might not be for the whole day. It might be for certain parts of the day. I mean, there's a really wonderful advantage of that because then your child will get what they need. But if you want your child to be with children exactly their age, this might not be, Montessori might not be an approach for you.
Thank you. And with, you said both training from our teachers from Montessori and Reggio, what is the way to find out that? Is it just saying, can you share with me, are you certified as Montessori training or Reggio trained? What were the questions?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, tell me about your Montessori experience so they don't get too offended. You know, have you been certified in it? And with Reggio, the same thing. Tell me about your Reggio experience. I mean, in, you know, these pure Reggio schools, I know in New York, you know, they used to go to Italy to, you know, that's where Reggio started, to really experience the Reggio way for a summer. They don't do that anymore, but, you know, there's lots of courses online, there's trainings. And you have to see what the school, you know, how the school supports the teachers with that, or you know, or it could be just the head of school who has the experience, which is really okay with Reggio because they could train other people.
Thank you. Whoops, before we go into Waldorf, there was one question about Reggio that I wanted to ask. Sorry, my online internet, I think, is sticking a little bit. I think I asked this too, so audience member, I'm there with you. I think I said, is this the same as like an outdoor, like a nature school or schools that are on farms? And that's a whole other approach, right?
That's a whole other approach. You know, I mean, there's the forest school where, you know, children are outdoors all day long, except when they eat. So this is like winter, spring, summer, fall, so it could be freezing. So it's different. I mean, they use the forest or the environment on the outdoors. You know, some schools might have it. I mean, some Reggio schools might do it. You know, I mean, with each approach, these are very generalizations of approaches, but wherever you're living, there might be a Reggio school that says, you know, we're going to do this outdoors and we're going to combine, you know, like sort of the forest school approach and the Reggio.
Thank you. So heading into Waldorf.
So Waldorf is really very interesting. So there's an emphasis on creativity, imagination, and really disconnecting from technology. You know, and it's a very homey kind of environment in many Waldorf schools. You know, when you come in, you take off your shoes, your outdoor shoes, and you put on your indoor shoes as a sort of respect for it. Oral language is really the hallmark. It's getting children to have conversations, to support receptive language, you know, and getting them to speak and understand, and expressive language. And practical skill building is really important. So children do things like they sew. I wonder how many people still know how to sew. You know, they sew on buttons. They also like cook, so they learn to chop things. You know, this is all like fine motor work, I mean, there's like a real reason for it. And they do other practical things. They sweep the floors with child brooms, like they really take care of their environment. The focus is really independent living, independent skills, and teachers, to create this like really homey, strong bond, they stay with their children for more than 1 year. How many years? It depends on the Waldorf schools. There aren't that many pure Waldorf schools in the United States, but there still are some. And these are some of the things that they do.
So thoughts on, as you're thinking about your child as a learner, what might a Waldorf school support for what type of child learner? Are you putting a child in who might not have their oral skills yet, or is that overwhelming?
I think it's a family choice. I think, if these things are really practical to, important to you, if you're like a pragmatic family, like these things, like, you feel, children really need to learn life skills, like, education's important, literacy, all this cognitive stuff. But if this is important to you, then this is the kind of school, because I think, most kind of children will, be supported in this environment.
Thank you. And so then we wanted to also touch on language immersion skills, because that's definitely an important component to what families are looking for today.
So there are two kinds of language immersion schools. So there's one approach that uses one language one day and another language the other day, or in the morning they'll speak one language, in the afternoon the other. And it's, it just sort of, they alternate. And there's a lot of, there's research on this, that children will able to learn languages this way. There's also a way where language development happens a lot quicker, and it's really immersion. And it's everything is done in this second language. There's no English spoken. So you might be thinking, oh my goodness, what's going to happen with my child? Children are so resilient and they're so open. And before you know it, they just pick up that language. If this is something you're interested in and you don't speak that language, don't worry about it. Schools understand that. Many schools do not expect the parents to be fluent in that language, although it helps when the children get older just to support their homework. So if you're looking for a school that, does things in another language, you also need to look at the philosophy of the school. Because there's one thing, okay, we do things in Chinese or Spanish, but what is their philosophy of the school? Because there's all kinds of philosophies. Many language schools, have a more traditional philosophy because it really stems from whatever country those languages are spoken. So when you go visit the schools, ask them about the philosophy, how they teach it. Ask them to tell you about a typical day. I think that'll give you a sense on how, the flow of the day. The third teacher, how things are going. Do they get homework? When do they get homework? What do they do after early childhood? Do they have an ongoing school for kindergarten and up, or do you have to look somewhere else? So those are all the kinds of things that, you need to look at.
Lynn, we had one question, and then I promise we're looking at all of these questions and really excited to answer a lot of them towards the end. When you said traditional approach to the language immersion, what is your definition of traditional?
A traditional approach might be something that most schools use from kindergarten and up, that they don't use in the early childhood world in this country, but schools that, sort of are part of another culture are still connected to workbooks, ditto sheets, lots of sitting. Yes, there's plain materials, but they just use them differently, and they also have, there's another part of the focus of the curriculum. And it's teacher driven, not teacher facilitated, if that makes any sense.
Thank you. Now we're going to talk a little bit about Vivi's approach, which is the inquiry-based approach. And I think this is powerful for two ways. First, to just share what we do and why we do it. But also, as Lynne said from the beginning, a lot of the options that you're going to have out there for daycares and preschools are really the approach is not the official, it's the official approach perhaps, but it's not 100% all Montessori or 100% all Reggio or Waldorf, et cetera. That a lot of, there are a lot of options out there that kind of pick and choose what feels right for them according to their school philosophy. So this is one way that we do it, but you might find that there are options in your area that also kind of pick and choose and play off one another, because as Lynne said, there are some connections across all of these philosophies too. They're not just specifically cut and dry. There are a lot of the things that are important across all of these philosophies are kind of interconnected. So Lynne, back over to you.
Okay, so inquiry, at Vivi, basically it was created by taking really the best of these philosophies that you just heard of and sort of putting them together to support learning of children. So I'm just going to give you some examples. So for instance, at Vivi, like Reggio schools, we take one topic and we don't do it for a week like some schools do. We use what the Reggio people call the project approach. We extend the learning over a length of time depending on how children are interested. Our environment at Vivi is really important. If you go on the website, you'll just see how things were designed, and that's really part of the Reggio approach. So it's sort of a little bit of everything. Like Waldorf, language we know is really important, so expressive and receptive. Language skills are so supported. Teachers get lots of training in this area because we really want to hear what children are thinking, what they're wondering. And that is really how we create curriculum. So children, using the inquiry approach, they do have a voice in the topics that they learn about, because it really doesn't matter what topic it is. You can really stick in any skill and concept in there. If you're talking about the children are interested in, I don't know, I'm thinking in dinosaurs, or they're interested in pizza. It doesn't matter what it is. You can create a curriculum in all areas of learning based on their interests. Also, the inquiry curriculum, I guess I've said this, it's, rather than a weekly, what I call an in-the-box curriculum, where everybody in a center is doing the same thing, or in any program, children really drive these month-long curriculums. So I thought, rather than talking more about this, I just want to show you, like through an example, on how a curriculum was created. This was, I think, a 2.5-year-old class. This totally came from them. I never thought this would happen. So this was a class, I think they were 2.5 and 3. And at this school at Vivi, the other side of the room, there were infants. And they kept on looking at the infants and talking about the infants and singing to them. And the teacher said, I think that our children are really interested in babies. Maybe we should start a baby curriculum. So that is exactly what we did. The teachers brought in a few babies to see if they were interested. And from that, this is the curriculum. So this is sort of the monthly curriculum that was created. So at Vivi, when we create curriculum, we think about all domains of learning. So if you look at the sensory box over here, it says baby bathing station. This was something that children were interested in. They said, we have to give the children a bath. Let's make a baby bathing station. So they did, and they created signage. So there's a lot of writing and literacy. And then, the babies really needed to be dried off. So then the teachers gave them fabric and some needle and thread, and and they started sewing blankets and towels to dry them off. So that is what the inquiry curriculum. So if you look at the screen on the left side, it's basically looking at children's play. Teachers are a big part of this. Teachers are observing what they're seeing, what they're doing. And from that, we're also looking at the learning domains and developmental milestones. So, this kind of curriculum for a preschool might look a little bit more sophisticated than for a 2-year-old class. It might not. And then we're creating these webs. So we call this thematic way of doing things. We call them curriculum webs. And what we know is we want to parents to be partners in this educational process. So at Vivi, we actually send these webs out to our families. We want them to know what you're doing, because when children come home from school, you say, "So how was school today? Well, what did you do?" And they say, "Nothing." That's pretty typical. So these webs we hope will give parents like the information, the questions. You can say, "Oh, I see, did you make that baby bathing station yet? Tell me about it." Whatever the conversation is. Because you have this web, it's stuck up on your refrigerator and you can refer it to all the time. So I guess that's anything else, Gretchen, about?
Yeah, so I wanted to connect it to a question that I just saw pop in. So whether you're an infant or toddler, teachers are really observing what interests are driving the children in class. So it might be a particular toy or a particular topic. We can look outside in our infant and toddler rooms and see the cars and the vehicles go by. And so that might be like, oh, it looks like everybody's really excited to go to the windows. When our children start to verbalize and they can really start talking about things, teachers are really observing them. And so in this instance, they were really into the babies. I know right now in one of the preschool classes, the transportation theme evolved into a New York City theme, and that evolved into a boats theme. So we're really trying to dig in and listen to what is driving the children. And so the theme is really coming from them, but the domains and the developmental areas don't ever change. We just design activities based on the theme, but cut to the core learning domains and developmental milestones.
Yeah, Gretchen, I can tell you, in one of the infants classes, the children, they were crawling over to these boxes and all they wanted to do was try to climb over and see what was in it. So the teachers now have a boxes curriculum in one of their classroom, and they've covered the boxes with tinfoil and other things so they can touch and feel it, and they put interesting things inside.
So I wanted to also go back, Lynn, can you share where Montessori shows up in Vivi, at Vivi?
I guess, at Vivi, the curriculum is individualized. That's really Montessori. That's another way of saying it. So, we might have a child who we actually, a child who's reading like chapter books, so that would be incorporated in. Or, fine motor skills are more sophisticated. So that, that's really a big part of Vivi. It's really this sort of observation that, that's why we called it inquiry curriculum, because inquiry is really inquiring what children know, what they need to know, and how we can support their learning.
Thank you. And I want to answer a couple of the bottom questions, and then Emily, I'd love to get your advice on some of the questions that we might have missed. Thinking about children agreeing on themes, or one child might be drawn to one thing, or one child might be drawn to another thing. And I want to name that in Vivi and many play-based daycares and preschools, there is an opportunity to leave that theme and come back. And so I think a lot of childcare centers, regardless of approach, will have opportunities for individual choice time, and will have opportunities for circle time where you're talking about your day absent of the theme. So there are many times where we're going away from the theme in the day in order to make sure that the child's interests are met individually as well. So it's not that it's boats for the 8 hours that, you know, everyone is together. It's really an overarching idea where the curriculum is driven from, but plenty of time throughout the day for children's individual interests.
And I can just add to that. So let's say the curriculum is boats, but some children really start talking about, I don't know, the water and they're swimming or what lives in the water. The beauty of this kind of curriculum is that it can pivot. So it's not like we are like tied down to whatever that theme is. It's like, okay, you know what? It seems like that, you know, there's some children who really are so interested in what lives in the water. And so that can go hand in hand. It could be a dual curriculum, or then you could just branch off and just start talking about fish, you know, and they're not interested in boats anymore. So although we say this is a month, you know, sometimes it lasts for a couple of weeks, sometimes it lasts for 2 months. It's really up to those children in that class. Every class is different.
Thank you. I think we can go back to some of the earlier questions, and I wanted to please feel free, audience, if there are more questions in, we'd love to hear from you. We have one question about transitioning from a Montessori at a younger age, at age 2, to more traditional learning in like pre-K or beyond. And is, in your opinion, do you think it's better to stick to one method since a younger age, or you know, do we have to find a Montessori school for kindergarten, elementary school? What are some of the factors that you would think through?
I think it depends on your child, and you know, you don't have, you know, children like change over the years. So what your child is now, you know, basically in their early childhood years, you're building a foundation. So if it's Montessori, Reggio, if it's inquiry, you know, it in the end of the day, it matters about that foundation they are building, and any of those foundations will work in another school. So you don't have to think, you know, that they're going to have to do a Montessori school for the next 12 years. Absolutely not. Unless you want to, you know, that, I mean, these are all, you know, I think one of the challenges is, as parents, we have so many choices now that it's really confusing.
I would say the other end of the spectrum too is if you're doing a preschool that's maybe a little bit more structured, but something that's unstructured. So either way, it could flip-flop in that direction too.
Yeah.
A question or a comment here. Waldorf sounds very similar to Montessori too, where children learn to take care of their environment and learn life skills. And we can talk a little bit about the overlap of some of these approaches.
I think, you know, the early childhood programs, there's lots of overlaps. You know, if they're play-based, if there's practical skills, every school, specific school, will have different overlaps depending on what they value, what's important to them. So I can't do it in a general way, but there are definitely overlaps, you know. And I think the similarities are that children learn best when it's like hands-on and they're engaged and they're motivated. And, you know, that's what every school strives to do, no matter what their philosophy is.
We have one question about Vivi and analyzing the learners of an infant and toddler. And then I'd like to also branch that out to a really great question that you can be asking either your child care provider or your preschool provider. You know, one thing you can think through as you're starting is, when and how often do I get updated on my child as a learner? And so for Vivi, we have twice yearly called Child Celebrations, where we really sit down with parents, the lead teachers in each room, talk about truly your child as a learner, what to celebrate and what things to partner with at home. And we do that from an infant age all the way up through to pre-K, I guess you would call it, or preschool. And then we also have a kindergarten admissions process where we really support you as you're thinking through transitioning into kindergarten. And it helps us talk through how we believe your child thrives as a learner, and what programs might be best for them, what programs might not be suited for them. So really trying to partner with them with the child in mind. And I would also say, Lynn, that would be something important to look for in a childcare or preschool.
Having that, yeah, I mean, thinking about the child and yes, and what their interests are. Absolutely.
Thank you. Gretchen, I think if we could get out of the screen share now, that would be great. So we can
so
see everybody
sorry. Yes,
again. No worries. And related to, I'll add myself in the spotlight while I'm talking. Related to that question, if you aren't in a program like Vivi, which is like very focused on what type of learner a child is and actively helping you figure that out, or if your child is at home, with a nanny or doing an at-home daycare, how do you figure out what type of learner your child is or what type of environment they would thrive best in?
That's a great question.
It's a great question, and it really depends on the age. I mean, with a young child, you're just really not going to figure it out. I mean, the kind of learning, it's really auditory. So, does your child really tune into what you're talking about? Or do they need visual cues? Some schools have lots of visuals going on. They'll have visuals on the wall for the daily schedule and for circle time and for other things, where other schools will do things more non-verbally. So it's really, I think this really gets to be really important for the kindergarten years. Like it's sort of, it could go either way for those early childhood years. So if you're in a school, if your child's in a school, you should ask your teacher, and they might not have thought about it. Say, what kind of learner do you think my child is? How do they best respond? What times of day are they most focused? And that will help get that information across.
Great, thank you. And that actually brings me to another question that, I've seen in some of my groups that I manage, and I myself have wondered, how much does it really matter at these young ages that you find the right type of program? There are, like you said, so many choices for parents of young children these days. It can be overwhelming, it can be stressful. I know some moms are looking at this like college applications already, like how much weight do you really think we need to be putting on this?
I think what's most important is finding a program where teachers are trained, where teachers have, they've gone to school, they're in master's programs, or they have master's degrees, that a place where they're going to get a foundation, in that what we call learning domains, what other people call milestones, and that all of them are important. I think it's a school where they don't stress some of the cognitive kinds of stuff over the social emotional stuff, because that's just as important. And they look at the whole child. Specific program, it doesn't matter, but all of those factors are really important.
I'll also tag on two things that we do in our kindergarten admissions process to answer this is that we have an amazing teacher at one of our campuses who's led the admissions process for a long time. And she was talking about, preparing the children for interviews and for, readiness. And she said, really overall, the kindergartens are looking for that social emotional. They're not looking for the, the cognitive, the math and science, the reading. They're really looking to see how you interact with other children. Can you share? Are you able to collaborate? Are you able to listen and respond? And so really prioritizing social emotional over cognitive in these years makes a lot of sense. And I'll also quote Lauren Smith Brody, who is the author of The Fifth Trimester, and she's a partner with us, and she's done a lot of data and research on daycares and preschools and childcare in general. And she said the number one most important factor that's come out of this data of how a child will thrive in their childcare situation is how comfortable the parents feel in the choice that they're making. And so part of it is to say, how comfortable are you with the environment? How easy are you in letting your child go and enjoy their day? How confident, your confidence almost comes from their happiness and just being able to play all day and play while they learn and play with their buddies, and knowing that that's happening for them can, I think, solidify how confident you feel. And then it becomes more of a virtuous cycle.
Mhm. Thank you. And I have one question. I'm kind of piecing together other questions I've seen come through and adding some of my own. But if a child has gone through a program that is more focused on play or discovering their environment, less focused on, more rigid learning, how do they, I guess, do you think they feel prepared when they go into a kindergarten and, other children might know all the letters, uppercase, lowercase, counting to 100, maybe even reading, does that matter at that point, or does a child adjust very quickly?
Children adjust. It is developmental. It's where they're at developmentally. Some children learn to read when they're 4, others learn to read when they're 7. I promise if you walk into a 3rd grade classroom, you have no clue who started earlier than later. They are all reading at the same level. So as Gretchen said, I think a lot of this is about your parents and their angst about this. Like, oh my God, someone's doing the alphabet and they know how to. It all really happens, and it's really about the development of a child. So a child who's in a play-based school will not feel at a disadvantage in a kindergarten. I mean, kindergarten teachers are trained, to work with all kinds of children, and they all sort of catch up and work to their potential. That's really important. Everyone works to their potential and everyone has a different potential. And it might not be what you think the potential should be of your child, but your child knows what they can do at a certain stage of their development based on their, age developmentally, not chronological age, but where they're at.
I also want to stress, in addition, play-based, because play is children's work, it doesn't mean that there aren't like true cognitive learning skills going on. And I say that because I'll use an example of my child who's in the preschool class at Vivi. It's almost like covert learning through play. And by the way, we've got a child who's slightly younger than my son, not quite 4, and he's reading as the truck's going by, and I still have that nervousness of like, but my kid's not there yet either. But then I realized he's doing, a fishing game where they're fishing for how many numbers of fish. So they see the number 4 and they've got to catch the number of fish that the card says. And it's truly a game to them. It's truly something fun. And we're not saying, look, you learned the letter 4. We're saying, oh my gosh, you caught 4 fish. That's so exciting. And at the end of the day, I know he's coming back with more cognitive skills than he thinks, and then I think. It's just designed in such a way that it doesn't feel, it feels like this immersion in a way that it's not, you don't know that it's happening while it's happening. And then they are actually even more prepared because it hasn't been this like 4, what's the number 4? Draw the 4 for me. It kind of blossoms out of them. I don't know if that was super articulate, but.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and what I like to say is, every moment of the day from when children walk into Vivi is really a learning experience, and learning happens definitely organically. I mean, it's from the teacher's point of view, it's very purposeful, but from the child's point of view, it just sort of happens very matter-of-factly.
Thank you. I don't know if you guys have a few extra minutes today, but I think there's 3 more questions that I've seen that are, I think will be really helpful to everyone. One is, if there is kind of a program that does not fall into one of these philosophies, like maybe you would call it more traditional in nature, how can you try to evaluate that type of program? Like if, I guess you're not looking at the exact philosophy, what type of learner your child is, but are there certain things you should be looking for, certain things you should, maybe see as red flags?
I think you want to know if, traditional programs are fine. All philosophies are fine. There's nothing wrong with any of them. If there's opportunities for a play experience during the day, if it's all sitting at a desk and whatever they're doing in a very structured way, then that might be a red flag. You want time for children to interact with their peers. This is about the social emotional part of it. That's really important part of learning. So, even if teacher directed, you would like to see some teacher facilitated and peer facilitated interactions throughout every single day.
I think too, you can bake this into, in general, what you're looking for in a daycare or in a preschool environment. You can point blank ask, tell me a little bit more about your curriculum, or what's a day in the life or a week in the life going to look like? Can you share with me what a sample daily schedule might look like for a child in the age group that my child might be in? Or do you have any philosophical approaches that you believe are important? And I think if they can't quite provide that for you, then that might be a little bit of a red flag, because they should be able to speak to what their learning philosophy is, even if it's more general rather than specific. And they should also be able, I think if you are in a school that's prioritizing teachers versus, maybe caretakers that don't necessarily have a teaching approach or a early childhood education approach, they may not be able to design a day as robust as something that you might be looking for. So just a couple questions to ask them.
And also you can ask them, if you're not there, what's the favorite materials in the classroom? You want to see, are there blocks in the classroom? Are there cars? Are there Lego? You just want to, because that will give an indicator about how much, learning, sort of organic learning is going on besides traditional learning.
Thank you. Next question. I see this question come up a lot in my groups, and I actually had it myself when my daughter was first born, or I guess when I was pregnant, when, you're thinking about getting pregnant, which is the time to apply for daycare in New York. Can you talk to differences between daycare and a 2s program, 3s program, preschool program? And I can answer, I know exactly what this question's getting to, so I'm happy to help answer it too, but I'll let you guys go first.
So, I think, like Vivi, I look at Vivi as being a hybrid. That's sort of how, that was the model. Sort of, daycare to me, this is sort of, maybe it's subjective. It's just like a long day. That's daycare. So you care, from early in the morning to late at night. And, and in addition to the daycare, there's also learning. So, some daycares have daycare where they're caring for the child and learning. We do care and learning. Not all daycares do that. So that's sort of a question. You have to figure out what you want from this daycare scenario.
Mm-hmm. And I would say that's a great place to start, where if you're, I would look at the school as a whole. Are they just offering a 2s through 4s program? Then they're focusing on really, I would say, age group developmental milestone preparedness, and then preparedness into kindergarten. I think if you're looking holistically, if a program is longer in the 0 to 5 program, they're starting with the whole child from the beginning and really thinking of it as a developmental process. So it's truly, it's also, what is in your area? Do you have,
right.
Are you really interested in a preschool that doesn't become available until 2s? Then that's what you should prioritize and think about your early childcare solution prior to that. I don't know if that helps.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. Yes, and a way that I've started answering this question for moms that are asking it is like a good daycare program, which are, a lot of the official, programs in New York or other major cities do include the preschool 2s, 3s program. So it's not like you're making a trade-off or you need to pull your child out of daycare to enroll them in a 2s or 3s program. It's included in the daycare. I can't speak to, smaller or at-home programs. Those might vary widely, and I think you just need to evaluate each individual program that you might be looking at. But yeah, it's basically like if you don't need a full day, then just a 2s or 3s program could work for you. If you do work the full day and you need a full day of care, then you look for a good daycare program that includes that too. And then another question that a couple people have is if you could speak to, is there a good time or a preferred time or recommended time to enroll your child in some sort of official program? Is it even necessary? Because a lot of families do start out with nannies and aren't sure if they should switch them at some point to a daycare or enroll them in a preschool program on top of that.
I'll just say personally, and then Lynn, I know you're going to speak for all parents. I started with a nanny, and I found that around 2.5, 3, I saw Noah in the playground, like wanting to be with people. And I saw him, instead of being with older adults, like really checking out the kids. And I saw a noticeable shift in where I think he wanted to learn and what I think he wanted to be. And I think as a unit, we were all just kind of getting bored of one another. And so he told me in not so many ways that this was the right choice for me. But I think it really is a personal choice for families, how comfortable you feel, and all of those logistical factors as we're thinking through things. And then Lynn, please come in from a more academic standpoint.
Yeah, so it's definitely like what works for your family, but this is really interesting. So, at Vivi, we have infants. So they've been with us now for a few years. And I can say the social skills, the comfort level with groups, it like blows my mind when I see these children who started with us, they were 3 months and now they're, 2.5, 3 years old. So, but you've got to feel comfortable. You have to feel, you're able to talk with your baby. You're going to, you have to trust the school, say goodbye. It's all going to be okay. And then pick them up at the end of the day. What we do at Vivi, and Gretchen could probably talk about this more, is, our communication during the day is so important, especially for these young, when you have a young baby. So we have messages that go back and forth between the parent and the teacher during the day, to make you feel good. But it really is a personal choice about what, when you're able to say goodbye. I mean, we all get it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. It looks like some people have specific questions about Vivi, pricing for different ages. I don't know if that's something you want to discuss now, or people should just reach out to you directly to discuss their own needs.
Yeah, I'll say 2 things. Please reach out to us directly, and we can get you all the right information for the right questions that you're asking. Pricing differs a little bit according to what you need. I will say traditionally, infants are the most expensive, and then because of a lot of factors, it gets more reasonably priced as your child gets older. So that's exciting as you're thinking about pre-K and preschool. I'll also say, as not only if you're thinking about Vivi, but if you're thinking about your childcare solution or your preschool solution in general, what are you getting for the price? So I know especially in New York, it can be really expensive, and that number can give you a little bit of a sticker shock, but try to understand what, for Vivi, it's 7 to 7. So there's essentially 12 hours of care and learning in a beautifully designed environment with specific focus on curriculum. And so when you start to add that up, then the dollars make a lot more sense. So really, as you're asking and comparing your preschools and your daycares, what all are you getting that you would potentially have to consider or not consider as an expense if you weren't in that situation. But please direct us. We'd be happy to have those conversations.
Thank you. I know Vivi also has a great deal for Mom Crew, where if you enroll by a certain date, you can get your first month free, which is a huge savings. And if you annualize that, that helps too. They also have some great in-home daycare programs. I'll send all of this out in a follow-up information. I'll also copy Gretchen on the email. So if anybody does have questions, you'll be able to find her email very easily to reach out directly.
Thank you, Gargi. We have a first-time mom in the program that's here.
Oh, nice. Yes, I know some people in the Mom Crew groups send their children to Vivi already. So if people do have questions, I'm sure everyone would be happy to answer them. Gretchen and Lynn, this was really helpful information. Even as a daycare veteran mom, my kids, 4.5 and almost 2 have been going since they were 7 and 10 months old. And I still learned a lot today. So that's great. Thank you everybody for joining. I will send a follow-up email out. The recording will be available on the web. So if anybody, had to miss part of it or missed it entirely, well, you won't be hearing me talk right now, but you'll be able to listen later. Thanks very much and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.